We are so glad that you could all join us for today's GLR Learning Tuesday session hosted in partnership with Early Learning Nation magazine, Children's Books from Access to Opportunity. A core component of the Campaign for Grade Level Reading's forward-looking civic action and advocacy agenda is to embrace learning happens everywhere approaches that make literacy-rich environments community-wide and ubiquitous, beginning in the home, of course, but extending out into all of the everyday places and spaces where children and families frequent. These literacy-rich environments are vital year-round, but especially so during these summer months when schools are closed and children in economically challenged families who often don't have access to engaging learning opportunities fall behind their peers and the learning gaps widen. I am so delighted to be joined today by an amazing panel of leaders who are leading the way to end book deserts and to ensure that children have ready access to books that foster a love of reading and that function as what Rudine Sims Bishop called mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors that enable them to see themselves reflected in what they are reading, to explore other experiences and actually enter other worlds than their own, building deeper empathy and understanding. And so, without further ado, I'd like to welcome and introduce this amazing panel today. Joining us to share insights from research on child development and book access is Ioma Aruka, a professor of public health and public policy and founding director of the Equity Research Action Coalition at the Frank Porter Graham Child Development Institute at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. Dr. Aruka leads several projects and initiatives focused on ensuring that minoritized children and children from low-income households are thriving through the intersection of anti-bias, anti-racist, culturally grounded research, program, and policy. And responding to that research, we have 4 innovative leaders who are working tirelessly to put books in children's hands. First, we have Tabitha Blackwell. Tabitha serves as the executive director of Book Harvest Durham, where she oversees all of Book Harvest's operations and programming in Durham, North Carolina, including a number of long-standing programs and new initiatives to provide books and literacy supports to Durham's children and families. Welcome also to Nora Briggs. Nora joined the Dollywood Foundation in 2019 to serve as Executive Director of North America, and she is driving the North America expansion of Dolly Parton's Imagination Library to reach more children and families in more communities. I'm also excited to welcome Alvin Irby back to GLR Learning Tuesdays. In addition to being an award-winning early childhood educator, social entrepreneur, TED speaker, comedian, and author, Alvin is the founder, executive director, and chief reading inspirer of Barbershop Books, a national literacy nonprofit that inspires Black boys and other vulnerable children to read for fun. Welcome also to Kyle Zimmer. Kyle is the president, CEO, and co-founder of First Book, an award-winning nonprofit social enterprise advancing educational equity for children ages 0 to 18 who are growing up in poverty. And to guide us through today's conversation, I'm happy to welcome Lee Giangreco. Lee is a freelance journalist based in Chicago, where she writes for the Washington Post, Bloomberg City Lab, and Pew State Line, to name a few. Since 2020, she's contributed to Early Learning Nation magazine, where she has covered preschool television program, New Mexico's fight for early childhood education, and the challenges facing bilingual educators in Chicago. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. I'm excited to learn with and from you. Over to you, Lee.
Thanks again, Sarah. Really appreciate it. And welcome again to all of our panelists and everyone else tuning in today. I'm going to kick it off with Ioma. Ioma, you've done quite a bit of research on the importance of access to engaging and diverse books through your work with the Equity Research Action Coalition at UNC Chapel Hill's Frank Porter Graham Child Development Institute. What do we know about recent population shifts in the US and the importance of ensuring children have access to a wide range of books?
Hey, thank you for that question, Lee, and glad to meet you. And of course, I want to make sure to thank Ralph Smith, Sarah, and of course, the Campaign for Grade Level Reading community. So honored to be here. And I want to sort of start by sort of sharing a really small story. I'm a mother of 2 children, a 7-year-old and an 11-year-old. And I just remember back in like 2020, like 2020, 2021, my mind goes somewhere else. We went to a library, we checked out a bunch of books, like 20 books or whatever it was. But my son sees this book and runs back in and says, I got to get this book. And it's actually Sulwe by Lupita Nyong'o. And to me, and mind you, I was trying to get him to read books and love books. So the fact that he picked that book, which has such a rich story about how and why we need darkness and lightness, there's so much in that story. It's a basic African sort of fable that Lupita sort of really delved into. But for me, it just told me that I don't have to worry about my son. If he sees a book that he loves and cherishes that speaks to him, he will read a book. And it's one of my favorite books and one of our favorite books. But really to go back to like the richness of your question, the points of your question, right? The diversity. We know that our country is becoming more diverse, right? It's becoming more Black and brown than white children. For example, we know that Latin populations make up close to 20%. The Black population is about 12%, and we have a growing multiracial, multi-ethnic group of folks as well. But even beyond the race ethnicity, we know that over 20%, which is 1 out of 5 US residents, speak a language other than English, right? So languages like Chinese, Spanish, Arabic, etc., right, in the home. So we have to understand the language diversity. But also we know a growing number of our US residents also identify under what we call SOGI, or sexual diverse social orientation, gender identity. So this means that our children, their lives, their community is really diverse racially, culturally, linguistically, also in terms of sexual orientation and gender identity. This means that they have to become much more sort of aware of the richness of diversity, but also find joy and value and respect for the level of diversity. And when we talk about the early years, especially when we know that is the time when brain is developing, when 80% of the brain really occurs is during that first, really, we say 1,000 days, but really even up to the age of 5, the first 2,000 days. That's when children's language development is happening, cognitive development, emotional development, that lays the foundation for children's both school learning, but also their lifelong learning, and obviously being able to address any trauma that they're likely to experience. So the early years really matters. And so if we're not able to really ensure that children are able to experience sort of richness across the board, I think, as Sarah noted, right, when we talk about sort of the mirrors, the windows, and the sliding glass, right? If children aren't able to really experience that, then we're creating what we call opportunity gaps. And I'll just quickly say, just briefly, that in 2023, the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, Medicine released a report called Closing the Opportunity Gap for Young Children. And they really talk about that opportunity gaps are the unequal and inequitable distribution of resources and experiences on the basis of race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, English proficiency, disability, immigration status, family situations, geography, etc. And they believe that contributes to or perpetuate inequities in the well-being across groups of young children in health, social emotional development, and education. And the lack of diverse books creates opportunity gaps. And I want to stress that it creates it, which then exacerbates any of the things that we're trying to address, like people talk about learning loss, all these other things. If we don't address the access to rich books that speaks to children in the way that really honors their own identity, their community, but also expands the minds of even children who are already represented in the literature, that if we don't do that, then we're actually not doing what our children need for us to do, which is ensuring that they are prepared for school, but also for life, but also to solve what we know are going to be even bigger social, economic, and even global problems like climate change, right? And so we need to understand the power of diverse books, not just for racially, ethnically, linguistically minoritized children, but it's really for our global society.
Yeah, and you touched on so many interesting points here that ELN is also reflected in its own reporting, talking about the importance of not only reading to kids, but reading to infants and sort of the long effects that has. So, Ioma, you did such a great job of outlining the importance of early access to engaging books. I'm delighted to be joined today by 4 innovative nonprofit organizations that are working to overcome book deserts, to build diverse home libraries and classroom libraries for children, and promote literacy-rich environments in everyday places and spaces where children and families frequent. I'd like to invite each of our panelists to provide a brief introduction to your organization, where you're operating, the population of the children you serve, how you engage kids and families, and how your organization got involved in book access and literacy. So we will start in alphabetical order. Starting with Tabitha.
Hi. Hello, my name is Tabitha Blackwell, and I am once again with Book Harvest, and I'm really excited to be here. Here at Book Harvest, we believe that all children have the right to own books from birth, and you all have just sort of heard the importance of that, but we really are dedicated to realizing a world in which all children and families flourish, and we do that with an access of free books, tools, resources to optimize their literacy. And one of the things that we are truly working on is our early literacy system of care, which delivers 4 particular programs that are evidence informed. And they are really meant to ensure that literacy is nourished for every child from birth and through the first decade of life. And so we start that sort of system of care with our very first program, which is Books from Birth. And that's where we collaborate with health systems and pediatric practices to send every newborn home with a starter home library of 10 books. So we're starting from birth, but we know that some kids are going to need a little bit, and families are going to need extra support. So for Medicaid eligible families, our second program that we have within our system of care is Book Babies. And our Book Babies program partners with families from the moment that a child is born and walks alongside them through the first 5 years of their life. And we provide quarterly literacy coaching visits, access to age and language appropriate books, and an abundance of resources for those families around literacy. We, as part of that, provide a transition because we want to be there for those key transitions in kids' lives. A transition into pre-K and kindergarten, and that takes us to our third program, which is Bridge to School. Our Bridge to School, working with families, specifically of children that are entering pre-K and kindergarten, to help them navigate through all of the applications and enrollment so that transitions to formal education settings are not only successful, but they're seamless for both the parents and the children. And then finally, we don't just drop them off at the door of kindergarten. We walk alongside them, and at another key point of where families have transitioned during school, which is summertime. And we all know that we want to hold on to all the rich learning that kids have had during the school year. And so we collaborate with school to sustain reading skills over the summer by offering students the opportunity to select up to 10 books for them to take home and keep forever at the end of the school year. We are currently in 13 different places across North Carolina and in conversations with 4 additional places in outside of North Carolina. So the work that we're doing is not just at home, not just at school. Here in Durham, we actually have a really rich community and are well on our way to making Durham, as we like to say, the city of books. And so we currently have 70 book hubs here, and that includes 45 book boxes, which are located in parks, schools, child care centers that provide books for kids, as well as 7 laundromats where we have amazing little book nooks for children to utilize while their parents are washing clothes. And then 18 bookshelves that are currently in, once again, partner organization spaces, clinics, and other spaces where kids have time, and we want to provide those opportunities for them, not to just read, but to take the books home and read. And even from that early literacy system of care, kids can get up to, if they're in every program, 170 books over the first decade of their life, which is really, really amazing. And so we will talk a little bit more throughout this, about the work that we do, but we're really excited to be here with these other amazing organizations and really work to ensure that there's a world where there's books for every child, support for every parent, and literacy for every community.
Thanks again, Tabitha. Really appreciate that. And I also love the idea of getting books in laundromats and places where, kids might not necessarily expect to find books. That's something we're going to touch on in just a little bit with one of our other panelists. Up next, we have Nora. Can you tell us a little bit about Dolly Parton's Imagination Library?
Absolutely, and thank you for having us. So Dolly Parton's Imagination Library is the flagship program of the Dollywood Foundation, Dolly Parton's nonprofit. It's a community-based monthly home book gifting program for children under 5. We mail high quality, age appropriate, down to the month, books to children from birth until their 5th birthday. It's free to the family, no matter their income. Since starting in Tennessee in 1995, we have gifted over 250 million books. Woo! To me, that's exciting. It's amazing to think of all of those children and families with books. We are currently mailing over 3 million children books every single month across 5 countries. We are in the US, UK, Canada, Ireland, and Australia. The Imagination Library comes from a very personal place from Dolly. So I thought it might be nice to have our dreamer-in-chief, Dolly, share with us.
Well, hi, everybody. This is Dolly. Now, before he passed away, my daddy told me the Imagination Library was probably the most important thing that I had ever done. That's saying a lot. And I can't tell you how much that means to me because I created the Imagination Library as a tribute to my daddy. Now, he was one of the wisest men I've ever known, but I knew in my heart this inability to read probably kept him from seeing all his dreams come true. So inspiring kids to love to read became my passion and my mission, because if you can read, you can teach yourself anything. In the beginning, my hope was just simply to inspire the children in my home county. But here we are today, an international program that gives a book each month to millions of children. Of course, I haven't done this alone. The real heroes of our story are the thousands of local partners and organizations who have embraced my dream and made it their own. They raise millions of dollars each year and wake up every day with a passion to make sure the children in their communities have every opportunity to succeed. It's been quite a journey, but we still have so much more left to do. And I would love for your community to join our family. Imagine a world where every child, regardless of their background, was surrounded with books, stories, and a love for reading. The first step is always the hardest, but you never really know unless you try.
And you got it, Dolly. We are all trying. Every single person in this Zoom call, on this panel, everyone who's involved with educating and trying to get books into more hands of more children. We're all trying to make a difference. So you've got it. My personal passion for reading and learning aligns with the strategic focus of the Dollywood Foundation, which is to drive expansion of the book gifting program across North America. So partnering with states to expand access for all families across all zip codes in the state provides the biggest impact. County level programs, they partner to ensure statewide coverage in all of those zip codes, providing equitable access for all families. Imagination Library books create a shared bond for children across neighborhoods, race, economic differences, and helps break division and the barriers. Children start kindergarten with a shared experience, which helps level the playing field for all. And in order to reach the most children, we're focused on state programs. So I have a slide which shows you the 21 state programs that have partnered, or the 21 states that have partnered with us with long-term commitments. We have 5 others in current process in the legislative session, or they're prepping for the very next session. And we have several more interested in bringing Imagination Library to their state. Since starting almost 30 years ago in Dolly's home county with 1,500 children, we are now reaching 1 out of every 7 child under 5 in the US. And our goal is 1 out of 4, 1 out of 2, every single child. Let's make sure that every little one in your life is signed up. And as Dolly says, we have a little bit of work to do, but together I know we can make that happen.
Thanks so much, Nora. And thanks, as always, to Dolly. Up next, we have Alvin. Can you tell us a little bit about Barbershop Books?
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for having me. Super excited to be here with so many fellow literacy advocates. The Barbershop Books program is focused on inspiring Black boys and other vulnerable children to read for fun. We have 3 programs. Barbershop Books is our flagship program, and that's what I'll mostly be talking about today. But we also have an e-library that features over 70 children's books by independent Black and Brown authors and are available online for free in their entirety. And then we also have a program called Reading So Lit that started as a summer virtual reading program. It is now an award-winning ed tech platform that will be piloting in schools. Our Barbershop Books program really focuses on supporting school districts, library systems, and other types of public institutions and enhancing their community engagement through the support of early literacy development. We support them in creating child-friendly reading spaces in barbershops and in providing early literacy training to barbers. There are a few, I think, really distinct characteristics of our programming that are important to kind of mention. One is that the books that we use are curated based on recommendations from Black boys and other boys of color. And the books look a little different than a lot of the other books that sometimes are curated for boys. I was in a barbershop recently, and I do what I always do. You know, if I see boys in there, I ask them what they like to read. And one of the boys said, "Oh, I like to read My Big Fat Zombie Goldfish." And I said, "Yep, that sounds about right." The books that we curate are not just based on the parts of Black boys or other boys of color that people can see, but it's also the parts of them that you can't see and that you only learn when you ask them. And so child-centered curation of books and reading experiences is central to the work that Barbershop Books does. We're super excited to have recently partnered with Susan Newman on a 2-year evaluation of our program in Philadelphia, where we found 3 key things that I think highlight the kind of impact of our work. One was that Black boys were more likely to be observed reading than doing any other activity in the barbershop. They were more likely to be observed reading independently. And the third and most dear to my heart is that Black boys were more likely to identify as readers. In both treatment and control barbershops, the number one thing boys said that they loved was they loved and identified as gamers. The second thing was as readers and as basketball players in the barbershops that had our programs. And in the barbershops that didn't, well, readers was further down the list in terms of how they identified. So our work is really just focused on cultivating the reading identity of Black boys and other vulnerable children.
Thanks so much for that, Alvin. And judging from the comments, both you and Reading So Lit are getting a lot of love. So really excited to see that. Up next, and last but not least, we have Kyle. Can you share a brief overview of First Book?
Sure, I'm happy to do it. First Book, first thing I want to say, by the way, is a big thank you to GLR and to Early Learning Nation for putting this together. It's such a critical topic, and it's very inspiring to me, even after all these years, to hear everybody else's wonderful work. First Book is a nonprofit social enterprise that I co-founded with a couple of friends over 30 years ago. Our mission is to elevate quality education for kids in need 0 to 18 years of age. We've done our work by building the largest community of adults in the lives of kids in poverty in the United States. And these are people who are in every imaginable setting, Title I and Title I eligible schools, of course, but also homeless shelters and soup kitchens and after-school programs and preschool programs. Any place where formally or informally kids are gathered with caring adults. We currently have about 600,000 members, I'm pleased to report, and we serve that community through 3 primary pillars. The first one is called First Book Research and Insights, and through this research arm, we generate about 20 studies annually on a wide variety of issues, from the impact of diverse books in the classroom to mental health to reading and literacy. And this data, we use it in 3 critical areas. First, it informs our own work. It makes sure that we're maximizing our impact. Secondly, it enables us to elevate the voice of this critical constituency in the public debate. And third, we work with wonderful corporations who work with us to make sure that in the design phase, their products and apps are created to maximize impact in those learning environments. The second big pillar for First Book is called the Accelerator. The Accelerator, through this platform, we expedite actionable evidence-based resources prepared in partnership with external experts. And these are on topics that are identified by our members, like children's mental health, like grief and loss, anything that our members say that they do not feel prepared for. We try to make sure that they have access to the thought leaders in those topic areas. The third pillar is maybe the one you guys are most familiar with, is the First Book Marketplace. This is our nonprofit e-commerce site, and we offer books, of course, ebooks, STEM games, basic needs items, our accelerator resources, all kinds of things. And we've grown this set of resources so that we are now the largest specialty buyer of children's books for most of the major publishers in the United States. We have an in-house curation team in addition to listening to our own network, and they're really second to none. We move about 12 to 15 million books through our systems every year, and those books end up in the hands of caring adults, families, after school, preschool, every setting, and ultimately in the hands of the kids who we're trying to reach together. All of us, I might add. You know, I think all of us recognize, and by the way, I wanted to say to my friend Nora here, we just hit 250 million books also, Nora. So we definitely need a glass of champagne together on that one. You know, I think that just to close out the description of First Book, we, all of us on this panel, all of us in attending this, believe deeply that we need to elevate reading. We need to elevate wonderful, diverse books in the lives of kids. And First Book's approach is to try to do it in a systemic way that makes lower priced books higher value, higher diversity, higher relevancy books available to the adults in the lives of kids, but also to lower those costs for all the heroic organizations like the ones you see on our screen. So I think what we're trying to do is really elevate the field and lower the costs. And that's how First Book approaches it.
Thanks so much for that, Kyle. And I love the friendly little competition, 250 and 250. We can just get all the panelists. If everybody can deliver 250 million books, then, you know, we'll be in business. So thanks again for those quick introductions here. Sounds like you're all serving different age ranges and embracing some different strategies for reaching children. All of you include a focus on young kids, some serving some older kids, which means that families are a critical part of the mix in getting the books in kids' hands. So let's talk a little about the family engagement side of your programs. How and where do you reach and engage families? Let's start with Nora this time.
Well, let's start at the community level, right? Local imagination library programs are established in communities down at the zip code level. They promote, find, and enroll children in their own communities. They are the heart of the program. We could not do it without them. They do a fantastic job with interconnection to local community-based program and literacy programs. And could I ask that we pause on that slide, and we'll get back to that during our impact? Perfect, thank you. So local program partners create partnerships with state, county, local libraries. They increase library usage for all family members. They work with birthing hospitals, enrolling children as soon as they're born, looking to find where babies are born, lots of different ways, but most importantly, so that children enroll as soon as they're born, so they receive the gift of 5 years worth of free books. Local program partners also partner with school districts and their school boards, their elementary schools. State programs partner with state agencies to find the most vulnerable children, such as children in foster care, babies born into correctional facilities, and children in WIC families. State programs also can partner with State Department of Education, so we can flag Imagination Library participants and track both participants and program effectiveness. We tie Imagination Library books received at home to adult literacy and dual language programs. Best way to learn to read, best way to learn a new language, best way to learn English, children's picture books, right? Ties into a multi-generational focus on literacy. Imagination Library books include family engagement and reading tips. So we're planting the seeds for families and communities to focus on family time and reading. And the one other thing that we never stop talking about is the fact that the program is special. Dolly calls this her heart program. Books come into the home by mail with the child's name on it. Child knows it belongs to them. This is where the magic starts. Kids, parents, pets, stuffed animals, caregivers, cuddling, snuggling around the book. The book is the tool. This is where hearts are connected to each other and to the books, to reading, and to the feel of love and security. We know these special moments stay with children. They stay with each and every one of us. We can all remember what it feels like to read with someone that we know loves us and is safe. And it's that moment that we hopefully can hang on to. And we know that children continue to do what they love to do. So our role in this is pretty simple. We just try to help them love reading.
Thanks so much for that, Nora. And 5 years worth of free books, that's really amazing. Oh, sorry. Alvin, would you like to go ahead? Sorry, I don't know if I broke up there. I apologize.
You're with us. You're with us.
Great.
Absolutely. So Barbershop Books is a family and community engagement model. So, we started out with, just me and a small group of people going into barbershops in Harlem. But today we have about 265 barbershop partners across 50 cities and 20 states, serving about 15,000 boys and other vulnerable children per month. And the way that we have gotten to that number is through partnerships with libraries, with school districts, with city governments who are looking to really center early literacy development for Black boys and for other vulnerable children. And so what they've done is really just use the Barbershop Books program as a catalyst to kind of, the natural raw materials for inspiring children to read for fun are already there. Many barbershops are already encouraging kids to read or do different types of enrichment, but maybe without support, without materials that are, really intentionally curated. And so that's really where Barbershop Books enters, is to make it really easy, really simple, and really impactful for, organizations that are looking to integrate and engage with difficult to reach populations within their city.
Thanks so much for that. And like we mentioned earlier, places like barbershops and places like laundromats, kind of the idea is meet the kids where they are, right?
Absolutely. I think that, one of the things that is unique about barbershops and the focus of the Barbershop Books program is being able to connect boys with male reading role models. And so barbershops provide a really unique opportunity for boys to be able to act with trusted messengers, not only in their community, but in their lives. And so, as we talk about what does it look like or to cultivate the reading identity, children being able to see, especially boys, males who are encouraging and inspiring them to read, really is a unique kind of possibility that barbershops are uniquely positioned to be able to do. But it is critically important that children see all the spaces, all the places where they go as opportunities to read.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Kyle?
Sure. First book, I just love listening to you guys, by the way. It really is. I mean, I've been at this for decades and it's still, I will not touch the ground for the next day or so from these stories and explanations. It makes me so happy. First book reaches families in a lot of different ways. A few examples are, as I mentioned, our members are in all kinds of settings. The ones that come to mind that reach into families most directly are things like home visiting nurses, early childhood educators, healthcare, social workers, all kinds of individuals who are deeply involved with families. And we hear stories all the time about how the books we provide through them increases that bond, increases that connection between the families and these critical programs in all of our hometowns. Also, just over half of our members are teachers in Title I or Title I eligible schools, and they regularly provide books for kids to take home and keep. In fact, we have a 13-year relationship with the American Federation of Teachers. It's an extraordinary partnership. Together, we've provided more than 10 million books to kids through their teachers. And we've heard again how the books create this wonderful connection between the teachers and the parents and caregivers and the kids, of course, themselves. And that bond, that pays benefits in reading and literacy and a million other ways, of course. And finally, we also serve military families directly, and we serve them through a number of the major organizations that are registered with us and are serving military, active duty military families. And it's a huge honor to be involved with them directly.
Thanks again, Kyle. And a little bit about how are families?
Absolutely. A lot of the ways that folks have already spoken about and the partnerships that we have with community partners. We have an amazing family engagement team here that works with families and work with our partners to do story times. They have a family advisory board that actually is a group of caregivers that are providing us feedback and thoughts on what we're doing and how we can better serve the families in our community. But one of the other programs that I sort of talked about, Book Babies, is working directly with families. It's in-home home visiting, and it's amazing to hear that it goes beyond just the book, to what Kyle was saying, that you could really, it's demystifying literacy. Everyone thinks that it's this complicated thing, when sometimes we have to say, just talk to your child. Look at the book and say the colors on the page, and really bringing home the fact that it does begin at birth, that reading to them is something that's important and it's a practice. And so during our, in every home visit, quarterly, our Book Babies literacy coaches are reminding families that just talking through the stuff on the pages, it doesn't have to be, because kids love to run around, and it doesn't have to be the reading word for word everything that's on the page. It truly is just really connecting with your children and instilling the fact that this is an important practice. And I actually saw one of the in the chat, one of our amazing Book Babies, or one of our families, or parents are in there, and she said, Book Harvest helped me understand the significance of reading from birth. My daughter is 4 years old and reading chapter books. She reads fluently and comprehends what she reads. My 1-year-old is right behind her, #bookworm. So I think that the stories of the actual parents and actual family members that's family engagement. They're the ones doing the work. We're just walking alongside of them and amplifying the good work that they're doing and letting them know that you got this and you can do it. So that's family engagement, is that thing that's not as hard as people think. In some ways, it's building the trust first, and you have to move at the speed of trust, which is something that we say around here a lot. And I'm just honored to hear all of the amazing work that other folks are doing around family engagement.
Thanks again so much for that, Tabitha. And I love the way you phrase that, walking along with families. It sounds like you're really empowering them and giving them the tools that they need, rather than just saying, we're the ones that can fix this. So that is so great to hear. So some of you are also partnering with schools and educators, whether working to ensure that books are available in schools, partnering with teachers to reach children and provide them with books. What do those partnerships look like, and why are they important? Kyle, if we can start with you.
You'd think after 5 years, I'd have my mute button really at the ready, but here we are. From our earliest days, First Book approached the lack of access to books and reading material in a way that was different from traditional nonprofits. We recognized that the chasm of need for books and resources was unlikely to be fully and comprehensively addressed by existing book donation programs. And I want to be really clear about the way I explain this, because book donation programs like the heroes on this screen and many who are on this call are critically important. We will not solve this problem without these programs, but these programs need help. So First Book approached this by pulling apart the economic model of the publishing industry, because we really believe that we have to address this gigantic chasm in a very whole field, systematic approach. And as everyone on this panel knows, and really everyone on this call knows, the traditional pricing models for the publishing industry mean that books, the best books that no kid should ever grow up without, are out of reach for teachers, for caregivers, for families who are serving and whose lives are wonderfully full of kids in need. And so that is where First Book focused our model. We went to the publishing industry with a business plan and an aggregated market. And we said to them, we know that if we aggregate, if we all hold hands and negotiate together, that we will be able to do two critically important things. To, number one, lower the price of books for all of us. And number two, we'll be able to show the publishing industry that there's a vibrant market for diverse books and all kinds of resources, but diverse books. And industries respond to markets. That's what they, because honestly, the color in question for most industry is green. That's the color, that's the focus. And so by locking arms across the field, we knew that we could accomplish this strategy and we could serve the entire field. And happily, like on our site, our books, I think the average cost, including shipping, is about $470 or $480 at this point. And we haven't stopped working. The bigger we get, the lower we can push those prices, and the more we can generate diverse books that celebrate the full, wonderful diversity of our country and our world. And just one little commercial request, which is, please, if you're working in a school or a program, or you're volunteering with kids in need, please, please, please register with First Book, firstbook.org. It's free. It doesn't take much. There's no obligation, but this is how we change. This is how we make seismic change.
Great. Thanks so much for that, Kyle. Tabitha, do you want to chime in here?
Absolutely. And I won't echo, I mean, I echo everything that Kyle just said, but also the pricing of books is something that a lot of educators, it really stifles the amount of diversity. And so for our program, Books on Break, we really come in with diverse, culturally inclusive books that kids are able to look at and see themselves. And right now, that's something that I know, because of budget restraints and teachers just not having the dollars themselves to do that work, we are able to bring to bear in some spaces, but there's always more need there. And then also just the absence of the joy of reading. I think because there's so much emphasis on testing and getting a test score for teachers, that sometimes that absence of having the time to really let kids choose the books that they want and explore different types of books. And so for Books on Break, we're able to give people the opportunity to say, this is a book I'm really interested in, and I'd like to really read it for the summer. And that's that time that they should be reading the things that really make them excited or are things of interest, because that passion for reading comes in being able to choose the things you're interested in. And that's something I know Alvin and his amazing organization is working on as well.
Yeah. And we'll get to Alvin. I do want to hear from Nora first, but I just want to note, it is funny what you said about kids choosing what they wanted to read. I remember in high school, choosing the books that were not on my reading list and reading those in addition to the books that I wanted to read. So it's kind of funny, like sometimes you tell kids what they should read, but if you tell them don't read this, that's immediately what they want to go to. So Nora, on to you.
Thank you. I think it might be important to share that the partnering piece. So in addition to partnering with community-based nonprofits and school districts who establish the community programs, we partner with childcare, pre-K, Head Start, early learning COGS, early learning hubs, early child service organizations, and elementary schools who does such an amazing job to promote the program, help and find enrolled children. So it becomes a community collaboration. That's really what's in its intent. That's what we're all here to do. Schools are the direct beneficiary, right, of books in the home. They're definitely the direct beneficiary of the Imagination Library program. The research and science is very clear. We cannot wait for kindergarten for children to have access and exposure to books and reading. We need to reach children early, and reading at this age, starting at birth, this happens primarily at home. So reading at home requires books, and not all families have access. Some families can't provide them. Some families don't know they should have them. This is where we can help. We want to make it easy for a parent to read to their child. So a book comes through the home, it's a gift. It's free, no means testing, but no proving that they need it, that they don't need to go anywhere to pick it up, and they don't have to return it. They can just snuggle and read together. So for almost 30 years, we've been sending books to children in their homes every month. Such a simple gift with immense returns, helping families prepare their children for school, helping parents carve out a little quiet time with their children. We know that books and reading strengthen the home environment as well. It supports the natural tendencies for families. Parents want their children to be happy. Being happy, building literacy skills, so important for success in school, creates the bond with the child that they'll have and last a lifetime. I think we all agree the primary benefit is to get books into the home, as we know there's nothing more basic, more essential, more foundational to child success in life than the ability to read. And that's exactly what our community partners and our state partners and our school partners are all working on. But we all agree it is more than just books. It is more than just the physical book that comes into the home. It's really investment into the child's future. We could not do it without all our partners in all the places. So I want to say thank you to all our partners and a big shout out. Thank you for doing everything you can to get our littlest ones into this program to get a book a month at home.
Thanks so much for that, Nora. And Alvin, I just wanted to see if there was something you wanted to add on to what Tabitha was saying earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, one of the things that we have discovered in the work that we do, supporting and encouraging reading in barbershops is really just centering the diverse ways in which we all interact and engage with reading. It doesn't always happen in the same place at the same time, or in the same way, and that's okay. And so for us, a lot of the work that we're doing is really about improving a lot of the social emotional competencies of reading, such as reading identity, reading self-efficacy, reading engagement, reading motivation and agency. Our Reading So Lit platform and our summer program is really about capturing strength-based data about not only the content but the environments and modalities that make reading personally meaningful, relevant, and engaging for children, so that parents know, oh, my son actually likes to read on the toilet, I'm gonna put a basket there, or he likes to learn new words in the grocery store or at the post office, so I'm going to start making sure I'm talking to him more about the words that we encounter when we're in those spaces, and really just supporting educators, supporting parents with actionable data that they can use to personalize reading experiences and accelerate reading achievement. And so that's all I would say is that, reading for all of us on this call, we make choices every single day about the ways in which we will engage with reading. And we just want to equip children with the vocabulary, the knowledge, and the experiences so that they can really be the captain of their own reading journeys.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that. So kind of switching here a little bit, we're still living in a global pandemic that caused closures of schools, childcare programs, and public libraries, and affected children's literacy and emotional development. With federal COVID funding coming to an end soon, schools, libraries, and nonprofits are facing tough budgets in the coming years. We're also seeing an unprecedented surge in book ban campaigns waged against libraries and public schools. How are your programs responding to these challenges? And Ioma, we'd love to invite you back into the conversation with this one. Oh, sorry, Ioma, or would you like to join?
Sure. Okay. Sure. I wasn't sure
Sorry
if you were
about that.
wanting me or somebody else. No, so I want to sort of answer this question and just add a little bit, right? So, because you talked about obviously the global pandemic, and I just want to make note there's actually this thing we call a syndemic, which is really this, and it really connects to what you just asked, right? Which is this synergistic sort of relationship between COVID-19 pandemic and really racism, right? That they're really are really creating sort of a burden on particularly Black communities and other communities of color and other marginalized communities, right? So it's causing what we're seeing a lot of disparities in whether it's mental health, academic challenges, cognitive challenges, social emotional, et cetera. So I think we need to sort of understand the COVID-19 and book bans are kind of related because of the undue burden they're having on particular communities. And I would say that in terms of sort of how are some people responding? So obviously, as from a research point of view, I think that we need research to continue to do better, stronger work in partnership with obviously some of these amazing panelists and community-based organizations who are doing the work with families, with communities. And so I think the research has to literally lean in, not be the, everything, but really be there, really showing the evidence and the impact of these community-rooted programs that are addressing clearly a need in the early years. So I think that research, we have a role to play in that. And we are seeing, more research starting to really go deeper and even more nuanced, right? Whether it's looking at, like, to Alvin's point, right? How are, say, Black boys really engaging in reading, but also doing a counter narrative. Black children read, right? They've always read, even when, if we remember historically, they were banned, potentially lynched, murdered from reading. So the idea of not loving to read is not something new to us, right? But also recognize that reading is one way, that books is really also a way of healing, right? We're seeing research really addressing how books and access to books really address the healing, being able to have conversations about your community, about your culture, being able to sort of have children even develop language, right? Rich language that's not just for school, but also to resist against all of the inequities that they're likely to experience either in early education or in schools, right? So again, books are a tool, right, to bigger and more important things for children's life, but also for their livelihood in many ways.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you highlighting how the pandemic exposed so many of those inequities. Those are things we're still unfortunately dealing with today. But it's great to hear how books are just one of the many ways that we can address that. So thank you again for that, Ioma. Alvin, I'd love to hear from you on this.
Absolutely. During the spring of 2021, the New York City Mayor's Office for Community Mental Health reached out to us because there was an increase in suicidality among Black boys in elementary schools in New York City. So an increase of attempted suicides and actual suicides among Black boys in elementary schools. And, one of the things that, to the point that was made about kids not, or kids wanting to read, we find that boys love to read the books that we put in the barbershop. A lot of them without being told. What they don't like is whack books. That's one of the things they're less likely to want to engage with. And so one of the things that I often try to communicate is that for many children, their resistance to reading or reluctance to reading, in some cases, is actually a form of self-love. Like, nobody wants to be tortured by anything. And some of the whack books that are being pushed on kids actually help, cause them to have negative reading attitudes or negative self-concepts about so many boys don't think that they're readers, not because they don't actually read, but it's because what they read is not affirmed in the classroom. It's not used for instructional purposes or things like that. And so I think that, a big part of our work is around speaking very explicitly about reading trauma. And so we tell barbers that a lot of kids have experienced reading trauma, and we give them the illustration that, if you meet a child who's been bitten by a dog, they don't care how cute your dog is, how nice your dog is. The sight of a dog, the thought of a dog can create anxiety and fear. And for many children who've had very traumatic reading experiences, they don't get those warm and fuzzies that children who maybe have had someone curled up with them reading, and so it's really on us to create the kind of conditions, to create the kind of environment where kids can feel safe to make mistakes, but also to see things and to hear stories that affirm who they are. But I think we have to really take a step back and look at how many of the systems, the instruction, the content that we currently are using and strategies to improve reading outcomes in some cases are actually doing the opposite in terms of decreasing reading motivation.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I appreciate you talking about, whack books. I think it's important that, parents understand that kids, especially little boys, they like books like The Zombie Fish, or they like things that are gross and weird. And sometimes you got to just lean into that if that's what they like to read. Kyle, would love to hear from you on this.
Sure. We are all living through a time period that's just fraught on all fronts. And I think first book is fully in a damn the torpedoes mode. I will say, first, our research arm, First Book Research and Insights, released 2 studies just a few months ago that are directly on point with some of the crises that I think it's appropriate to call them crises. One was a study that explored the impact of having great diverse books in classroom libraries. We identified 450 classrooms. We studied those sites for 6 months, and we just watched what happened with the kids. And we gave each of those sites $250 worth of diverse books through our website. And the collective reading in those classrooms jumped up by 4 hours. Their reading scores increased. It was all wonderful, great news. We also released a study on the impact of book bans on teachers. And this was a really chilling study for me to read, to be honest with you, because what we learned was that the impact, the damaging impact of these book bans, it far exceeds the districts and schools that are directly affected. And so it's really a damaging thing, and it's deeply troubling. You know, another response for First Book is, and I'm happy to announce this, that we are unveiling the largest scaling plan our organization has ever taken on in our 32-year history. Over the next 5 years, we want to quadruple the number of kids we reach every year from our current rate of 6.5 million to the full 27 million kids in poverty. In order to reach all those kids, we're adding 1 million new members to our network, and we're not fooling around about this. We are going to make this happen. Finally, we're unifying the sector also. You may be aware of a coalition we started a couple of years ago called the Diverse Books for All Coalition. Several of the organizations on this panel, as well as GLR, are actually members of this. This is a collaboration across the field to say, we have over 60 organizations that are locking arms and really committing ourselves to elevating diverse books, elevating books that are powerful for kids 0 to 8 years old. That's the sweet spot for this. We also are working with a new group that's growing and very dynamic called the National Book Access Association. A big shout out to that organization. We're their fiscal sponsor. If you don't know about this, please go online and check it out, National Book Access Association. And I just want to call out one of the comments in the chat, and I believe in the questions too, by someone who's saying, with all this good news, with all the, hundreds of millions of books, and all of us are working day and night to try to make a difference, what we are watching is reading scores decline in a lot of areas. And I think, that's a
Sorry,
tough
Kyle,
question.
if I could just, if we can maybe address some of this in the Q&A, just because I want to get to everyone.
Sure.
And then
I just want to say to everybody, I think we have to keep our eye on the data. That's all, because that's the end game.
Awesome. These are all great studies. I just want to make sure we get to everyone. Tabitha, if you can chime in here.
Yeah, I will make mine very quick. I know that we one of the things that Kyle just mentioned and others around the table have mentioned is the need for us to really be in coalition with one another and in collaboration with one another during these times. And I think that's one of the things that has been the strongest. And we've seen as an organization really working with who can we be in thought leadership with, how can we assist with families and community voice and lifting those voices up during this particular time. What would policy influence look like for us? So I think that there's been, during this particular time, it's been a lot of continuing to keep an eye on the data, but also in the locking arms part. It's something that we around the table need to continue to do and continue to think around, because it's not going to be one of us that solves it. It really will take all of us to do that work. And from the family perspective, having worked, we have a home visiting program, and we've seen the the space of isolation and families truly feeling like they just want more connectivity and more guidance. And so for our literacy coaches, they've really worked with families to bring community again. We've lost that for a while. So it's really the state of continuing to bring community and with one another, and really continuing to connect and bring resources to those families and to schools and partners as we see.
Awesome. Thanks so much, everyone. I know that you're all digging into your own research to understand the need for your programs and evaluate your impact. What have you learned so far? And Nora, if we could start with you, I think you have a slide to share with us as well.
I do, thank you. We know that Imagination Library books delivered to home, so for children from birth to 5, create an event. And it is the snuggling and sharing and interaction by reading together that starts to create a unique bond. The monthly book connects the entire family, creates a family routine. Over 25 years of research shows the impacts are significant. Starting with changes in the home literacy environment, with families connecting around a book, family members reading together multiple times a week, multiple times in the same day. A frequent comment that we get from parents is that children insist on reading the book before moving on from the mailbox, which is a great problem to have. We know that program can increase one-on-one time between parents, caregivers, and child. This starts and lays the foundation for consistent parent involvement in their child's learning and development. The results are seen when they go to school. They are better prepared for kindergarten. There's reduced retention. They perform better with stronger achievement tests, significantly stronger reading, math, and science, academic achievements, 3rd grade and beyond, higher graduation rates. We know in the communities, there's a connection and a focus with libraries and other literacy events and community neighborhood programs tying to the adult literacy. The personal experience of Dolly creates this opportunity for us to root this program in that experience, that she didn't want any child to feel like they were receiving a book because they were disadvantaged or were different. It's not a charity. Instead, the gift of a book should be for all children, all equal. And so that shared gift puts children on an equal footing right from the start. And we know that simply getting a book into the home, especially in homes where they may not know they need books, may not have access to books, may not be able to afford it, can change the trajectory of the children, families, and communities. And we are very, very grateful to help. I want to close one thing from our Dreamer-in-Chief, because I think it really does apply to everyone, is that she believes that the seeds of dreams are often found in the books, and those seeds are planted locally in our communities, and they can grow across the world. And she knows there are children in every community with their own dreams, and she wants every child to dream more, learn more, care more, and therefore be more. And so we are just grateful that we have an opportunity to help get books into the homes of children from 0 to 5. And I thank you all, my panelists, and everyone on this call for all the great work you're doing to impact children's lives. It's the greatest gift we can give them.
Thanks so much for that, Nora. Alvin, anything you want to share about some of the research you're digging into here?
Absolutely. So, I mean, the research that Susan Newman did in Philadelphia really just showed for us that, a lot of people hear about our program, and they think, oh yeah, dads reading with their sons, but a majority of Black boys are actually raised by mothers. And so it's their mothers bringing them to the barber shops. And sometimes they're not even staying. They're like, all right, go have your little man time. I'm gonna go run some errands. And so curating the books to really inspire and encourage boys to independently engage with them is critically important to cultivate their intrinsic motivation. Also, the fact that the program actually showed that boys were more likely to identify as readers, I think, provides some really early and initial evidence that we can actually systematically improve or impact a child's reading identity. And so I think those are really kind of key things. In terms of our work with libraries, we recently partnered with 4 library systems in 4 U.S. cities, Charlotte, Shreveport, Cleveland, and Columbus. And a recent white paper that came out, I shared a link. It showed that by implementing the Barbershop Books program, many of these libraries were able to reach families that were not coming through the door for their read alouds, who were not using their collections. And over 50% of the children and families were living in poverty. And so it also enabled them to kind of reach these difficult to reach populations. So I think it just speaks to the power of getting into the community in ways that maybe you might not have ordinarily, or for which you may not even have systems set up to kind of get into. And I think it speaks to the importance of collaboration, right? We can't do this work alone. Someone has a connection or a resource that we may not have, and figuring out what are those ways that we can leverage those synergies to then move the work forward, I think is what we've found.
Awesome. Great. Tabitha.
Lovely. One of the programs that we, out of our sort of early literacy system of care that we talk about a lot is our Book Babies. Because we have 5 years worth of data with these families, it is a really rich opportunity for us to be able to see the true impact of that early literacy work. And we were fortunate enough, and Ioma is here, but to have amazing folks doing a random control trial for us in the 2027 and between 2027 and 2020. And one of the things that we continue to do is collect data and see how families are really impacted by this work. And so last year during our survey, we found that 98% of those families agreed that Book Harvest's or Book Babies program provided support in creating a daily routine at their home and ensuring that they were continuing those great skills. We also found that 94% of them indicated that they're using those strategies, actually using the strategies that we provided, implements and improves their child's learning. And so we continue to do some amazing work with our families, and that particular Book Babies crew is the ones in whom have the opportunity in some cases to have over the time 170 some books with us. And it's amazing to see the work and the full early literacy system of care being put in place for some of these families and the impact that it can create. But yeah, we continue to look at different research pieces to ensure that we're continuing to be evidence informed and then consistently getting feedback and working with families to ensure that our program is growing and continue to create the strongest impact for the folks that we're working with.
Awesome. And Kyle, this is a great opportunity for you to jump back in with some of those studies you were mentioning earlier.
Well, actually, I want to focus on something different for a minute. I want to give a couple of examples for how First Book uses the research that we generate. One is we too worked with Susan Newman. It seems to be an epidemic here. But what we worked with Susan on was recognizing that a lot of teachers and most parents don't have the experience to judge whether the quality of the classroom libraries is where it needs to be. But there's no yardstick. There's no, so we worked with Susan. We created a tool that allowed a parent or a teacher to look at their classroom library and say, in a research-based way, this is adequate, this is not adequate. And then they can use that tool to walk down the hallway to the principal's office or into the school board and demand additional resources to boost that. It becomes an advocacy tool. You can find it on the First Book. It's available on the First Book Marketplace for free. Please check it out. And one other quick thing, we did a study of 3,500 First Book members whose students speak languages other than English. And as a result of their feedback, we have just launched a new world languages category on the First Book Marketplace. it's based on the survey, so based utterly on the feedback from practitioners, and there are bilingual book bundles in 19 different home languages. So I urge you to check it out. We'd love to serve all of you.
Awesome. Thank you again. So we have just a few minutes for our Q&A portion. So if we can get to the Q&A slide.
Or just keep going.
Oh, sorry. Oh, okay. Sorry, and sorry, I'm looking over at the questions in the webinar chat just as they come in, or
Here,
or
I'll help with that. I was pulling,
sorry.
popping them into the Q&A box. Thank you all so much. This has been such a rich and engaging conversation. And I know how hard it is, Lee, to kind of track the Q&A and listen to all this great feedback. Some questions that I found in the Q&A box that I'd love to share with you all.
Sorry, I'm seeing it now, at the very bottom. Okay, sorry. The starting with Nora. Yes. Okay, great. Sorry about that. Great. So Nora, after seeing the map of states in the program or considering the program, what is the process for a local area? This person is in New York to get access to Dolly Parton's program. I believe New York State Education Department is currently putting together a grant application for libraries, but wondered if there are other ways as well to get connected.
Absolutely. That is a great question. So we have a tremendous amount of states that recognize that they have a collection of special benefits and impacts when we go statewide. So that it means that every child in every zip code across the entire state would have access to a program, versus starting with maybe a small community with 1 or 2 zip codes. So in New York State, we do have support from several legislators, Department of Education, and the governor's office to create a statewide program. This year, we were not able to get the legislative components all the way through, just a matter of timing, but they did want to start seeding for statewide program by giving some money to the state library system to be able to provide a grant. So if they're interested, please reach out to me. I think my address is in the chat, and I'll get them connected with our other local program partners in New York. We have a lot of chapters, but we have a lot of places where we need to get we need to get programs going so that we have access for books for these children. Great question. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Nora. And all of our panelists have their contact in the chat as well, so be sure to check that out if you have questions for any of them. Our next question is for Alvin. Do boys in the program volunteer in any way with Barbershop Books? Do they speak about the role of reading to other boys and recommend books?
The main way in which our program serves, boys of color, primarily Black boys ages 8 and below, but the main way in which they volunteer and support our work is through providing us with recommendations of what they like to read. It really is their personal recommendations to us that help us stay true to kind of what's going to get them, out of their seats and engaging with the books in our bookshelves. But for our Reading So Lit summer program, we do hire male high school students of color, ages 16 to 18, and we hire them and train them to lead virtual reading explorations in small little cohorts of up to 10 boys. And so in those contexts, the boys do have opportunities to talk with other boys of color about reading and to explore the choices that readers make. But I'm looking forward to creating some opportunities for more high school students to get involved with Barbershop Books as a service learning project.
Thanks so much for that, Alvin. How can organizations go beyond book provision and educate families about what to do with the books they are given? And I'll just let one of our panelists volunteer for this, and if we can just get an answer from one panelist, whoever would like to answer first.
Well, I'll jump in and say that we have resources that we refresh all the time on the Accelerator, which are expert research-based resources, including working with our friends at Reading Universe, which is a science-based online strategy for elevating, what educators do in the with using books and teaching reading.
Right. We have another question. Someone who is wondering if the panelists could share how or if their organizations are supporting the shift to the science of reading across the country and supporting families in becoming advocates for their child and reading curriculum and opportunities once they get to school. Yoma, I might be interested to hear from you on this, given this sounds like a bit of a research question. I don't know if you'd like to jump in here.
Say that again. I think I heard you say program organizations. I assumed you were going to the other folks there.
Oh, sure. Yeah, and if one of the organizations want to chime in here, but there was a part here about the shift to the science of reading. But if one of our other panelists jump in,
I can quickly respond to that. So there, right. So we want to make sure, obviously, with the price that what people say the learning loss, which I don't actually like to use that term, regarding children's literacy, right? In terms of the loss of the pandemic, there has been this focus on making sure that young children at large, are able to really get the skills, the technical skills, to really engage in reading through the science of reading. We're seeing a lot of movement, obviously, in terms of legislation across many states that's saying that we won't give any funding unless a given, program is really attending to the science of reading. I think it is important that we obviously use all the evidence and research that has been done and accumulated over the many decades about what are the things that we have to do, and also how do we implement that in classrooms and programs to ensure children have both the skills, but also the capacity to be able to not just learn to read, but read to learn, right? So it's really that transitional part that's important. But we also have to be careful that we don't assume that this silver bullet of science of reading is going to address, right, all of us being able, on our country not being able to actually provide resources to families and communities and schools, right? You can't strip away resources from public schools and expect for children to just be able to read and be able to sort of, go through school. So I think it's really important that we don't sort of do the magic bullet thing and act like this is going to solve all those issues. It is really not, if we're not supporting families in terms of economic drivers, health drivers, and other socioeconomic drivers. And so it's important that we don't just take the science of reading to say that's everything. And so we're seeing much more of a comprehensive approach, like a Head Start program, that attends to obviously children's sort of academic, cognitive, social, emotional learning, but also addressing other sort of family resource supports, as well as supporting the workforce, right, who are often underpaid, under-rewarded, and also stressed as well as providing obviously the technical support around science of reading and other kinds of curriculum support.
And would love to hear from some of our other panelists on how they're supporting this and how they are supporting families in becoming advocates.
I can step in. One of the ways that we have a family engagement team in whom work directly and have access and have been doing a lot of some ways advocacy work with families and sort of helping them understand where their space and power is when it comes to when your child goes into the school system. What are the things that you need to be looking out for? How do you do a parent-teacher conference? The basics are a lot of times it's demystifying the sort of education system, especially because we do work with a lot of families that are have different languages coming from different countries, and our system is very different from theirs. So as I think about how, when we talk about science of reading and other things and how a family or a parent is able to navigate that, sometimes it is the helping to navigate the transition within it into the school system and into that space, because it can be a very different world for any of us. But understanding where are your rights and where can you and should you be advocating for your child in that space is really important, because a lot of families feel as if they don't have that space of advocacy and they may not know how and where to really advocate for their child.
Thanks so much. And I wanted to jump around to another question because I saw lots of comments about this in the chat box earlier. Can you address reaching little ones and families who are in unstable housing situations? And whoever would like to address this.
Well, I'll jump in and say, sorry, Alvin, you want to go ahead? Okay, I'll
No,
jump in
you
and
go ahead
say,
and I'll tag.
you'll add on. All right, tag team. I'll just say that, you know, kids who are in transition and are not in a permanent residential situation, we this is part of the reason we designed First Book, so that libraries, homeless shelters, you know, soup kitchens, like every community organization had access to the books and resources we offer, because we want that 360-degree surround sound for those families. And we know that not every kid is going to be touched by every one of those, but what we want is for those kids to be supported by as many of those community touch points as they can. Back to you, Dr. Irby.
What I was going to say is that I think those social emotional elements of reading are so important, especially for the most vulnerable children, because if you don't have the supports, you don't have anyone making sure you read or taking you to the library, then if you're reading, it's literally because you're intrinsically motivated to read. And so I think that often what's happening is some of the interventions designed to improve reading proficiency decrease reading motivation. And so I think that for kids who are, you know, chronically absent or who don't have enriching experiences during the summer, it's that much more important to be intentionally focused on what's the content, what are the experiences that are going to actually increase that child's intrinsic motivation to read, so that even if they're not at school, they're going to still hold on to that one book they have and read it every chance they get. And they're going to harass their parents the way kids harass them for shoes to say, I'm going to need you to go and get me that new Diary of the Wimpy Kid. I'm going to need that to happen. So I know it's possible, but I think focusing on motivation and engagement is part of how we can support those students, especially.
Thanks so much, Alvin. We do have to close our Q&A. I'm wondering if we can just end it on one last question, perhaps with Nora. The question is, we're giving out millions of books and have been for years, yet the literacy rates for children remain stagnant and in some cases have declined. Is this really a good use of resources?
I'm sorry, I think you froze it on that on my screen? Or is it just me?
I can repeat the question. So we are giving out millions of books and have been for years, yet the literacy rates for children remain stagnant and in some cases have declined. Is this a good use of resources?
Absolutely a good use of resources. Books in the home. Children need books at home. We know that they need to start learning and have that opportunity for exposure and access in the 0 to 5 space, right? We know that the first 3 years are most important. So it is not a panacea. None of the things that we're doing is a panacea. It's collectively together. And the beauty of the Imagination Library is getting a book into the home, a quality, age-appropriate book in the home. The other thing is we are now seeing also even more impacts due to what's happened during the pandemic. There was a lot of focus on K through 12 and above, but very little on 0 through 5, with places that children would have maybe seen their only print, their only textbooks in childcare and community centers and libraries and other places. They were closed. So there was a stagnant period of time where there were families that didn't have any books at home, maybe didn't have anything to share and read. And I do think that now is the time on so many levels to ensure that we get more books into the home. We wrap them around with all these community and initiatives and parent engagement. And more importantly, to Alvin and others' point, is to create that magical moment that feels good, where a child remembers that when they go to school, and it's not about skills and drills, but it's about the joy of reading, about the fact they can go anywhere, be anything, learn anything if they read, if they can read. And that's We're just trying to do one simple thing, which is get a book in every home for children under 5, where parents don't have to think about it, as a special gift equal to every other child.
Thanks so much for that, Nora. And thank you to all of our panelists. I'm going to turn it over to Sarah now.
Y'all are absolutely amazing. I think we are like 2 or 3 minutes over, and we still have 200 people in this room listening to everything that you have to say. So, I mean, that's testament to the inspiration and innovation and the commitment and passion that you're all bringing to this. So thank you so much for taking 90 minutes out of your day to share all of that passion and commitment with the GLR network. Thank you to Iama Aruka, to Baitha Blackwell, to Nora Briggs, Alvin and to Lee Greco for guiding us through this. Really, thanks to all of you. I think we were up to like 350 people at one point who joined in and listened to this conversation. I hope you'll join us next week. We've got an amazing lineup, double headers Monday through Thursday. I dropped the links into the chat just a minute ago. I hope that you'll join us for those. Want to flag the next slide where there's one session of these 8 sessions that is a Zoom meeting, not a Zoom webinar. So there's a special link just for this one. So make sure that you don't miss this engaging conversation. There'll be breakout rooms exploring attendance, high dosage tutoring, and community supports. Great conversation. And after planning 8 sessions in 4 days, the CGLR team is going to take a little bit of a break. And on the next slide, we've got our summer rebroadcast series, really timely, informative sessions that have happened in the previous months that are worth a couple of repeats. So hope you'll register for those and join us during August, and look forward to resuming live content on September 3rd. Thank you so much, everyone. And don't forget to join us next week for GLR Week. And thank you to our amazing panelists. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.